Paul, talk to us about the engagement between the scriptures and public life.
I think the engagement is absolutely central. In some ways, it's not that helpful to think of the Bible as a religious book, I don't think. It's a book about God and life and the universe and everything. And the Bible is the story of God and the world. And the deeper that we engage with Scripture, the more we necessarily have to engage in the culture of which we're part. I think there's been an idea at times in history that if we want to be authentically holy, we need to keep the world and the Bible, the world and our faith, as far apart as we possibly can. But the deeper that we press into Scripture and the God who is revealed through Scripture, the more we inevitably have to engage in the culture, the institutions, the organizations that are part of the culture that we inhabit.
That sounds amazing. What does it look like in practice?
We've seen it, haven't we? We've seen it this morning. We've just seen it. That's what it looks like in practice. It's amazing. And we've seen it in the course of history. We've seen it in the likes of Daniel and Esther. We see that in the way that Paul relates to culture. You know, the fact is he gives this extraordinary speech in the Areopagus, but he spends 6 months in the Agora, where the businesses and the coffee shops, well, the dynamic equivalents are, learning about the culture, absorbing it. He's a tent maker. He's interacting with business people all the time. We see it in the life of Elizabeth Fry. So Elizabeth Fry, until recently, was on the £5 note. Her image is now replaced by Churchill. But on that £5 note, you would see Elizabeth Fry, who was someone who advocated for prison reform, on that £5 note, reading the Bible to prisoners, women prisoners in Newgate Prison, which is such a powerful illustration of the connection between the Bible and society, the Bible and culture. Of course, we see it in Wilberforce, don't we? Wilberforce is this extraordinary individual who takes the Bible so seriously. He not only campaigns against the slave trade, but he sets up the Royal Society for the Protection of Cruelty to Animals and the British and Foreign Bible Society. And all of that endeavor and his political engagement is driven by this love of God. And he comes to know who God is, what God's like, the story of God and the world through his engagement with the Bible. It's a little known fact that Wilberforce was one of the people really who popularized the whole idea of a family Bible time. So he used to practice that in his house with his servants, who were basically always overpaid and underworked because he was very soft and very philanthropic towards them. And they would gather together for times to read the Bible. And again, from that, his desire was that that would shape his approach to everything, including the way that he tried to manage or mismanage his household.
You mentioned Wilberforce. Your PhD was on Wilberforce, was it not?
Yes, so slight correction. So the PhD is in the deep freeze at this particular point in time, and hopefully will be unfrozen. But in the course of doing that, I've read, I think, probably almost every word of his diaries, of which there are many words. And his handwriting deteriorated as he got older and lost his eyesight. But he is utterly extraordinary. He is an infinitely more radical figure than we often think. And the reason for that is most of the biographies of Wilberforce are based on the life of Wilberforce that his sons produced. His sons were embarrassed of their father, and they expunged whole sections of his diaries from the life that they produced in order to make him look more mainstream, more established. But he had a radical edge to him, and part of his approach was digging into the Bible and thinking through what are the implications of that, for not only for me, but for society. Because, of course, going back to this theme of the Bible, in the Bible from Genesis through to Revelation, there's this incredible theme around the glory of God and the life of the world. It's there in every page, every chapter, every book of the Bible, and Wilberforce understood that. And he often would scribble notes in his Bible. I've seen it. It's amazing. It's the closest thing you can have to an interview with him today. You just scribble what he's thinking about as he's reading the Bible, and he keeps these diaries, and he's got some extraordinary things to say.
Well, before I ask Paul the next question, one thing we thought it would be great to do is hear an excerpt from Wilberforce's diaries. And I'm delighted that this excerpt is going to be read by a friend of mine called Joseph Moore. You may have come across Joseph in things like Amazon Prime's The Rings of Power or the long-running BBC series Ripper Street. He's one of those annoying people that's both hugely talented and also thoroughly lovely in every way. And he's going to read this excerpt to us now. It does contain some words that I had never heard of before. You might want to get the dictionary app on your phone up as he reads this, but I wonder if you would put your hands together for Joseph Moore.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for this, Paul, I think. Get ready. This has got some words I've never come across before, and Paul, forgive me if I've slightly butchered some of Wilberforce's words, but I shall do my best. William Wilberforce on the relationship between the gospel and the welfare of the city in 1797, a little while ago. When we are inquiring into the real state of Christianity at any period, if we would not be deceived in this important investigation, it becomes us to be so much the more careful not to take up with superficial appearances. Christianity especially has always thriven under persecution. At such a season, she has no lukewarm professors, no adherents whom it is doubtful to what party they belong. The Christian is then reminded at every turn that his master's kingdom is not from this world. When all on earth wears a dark and threatening aspect, the Christian looks up to heaven for consolation. He learns practically to consider himself as a pilgrim and stranger. He then cleaves to fundamentals and examines well his foundation as at the hour of death. When religion is in a state of external quiet and prosperity, the contrary of all this naturally takes place. The soldiers of the church, militant then, forget that they are in a state of warfare. Their ardor slackens. Their zeal languishes. If Christianity, such as we have represented it, were generally to prevail, the world, from being such as it is, would become a scene of general peace and prosperity. And abating the chances and calamities which flesh is inseparably heir to, would wear one unwearied face of complacency and joy. Of Christianity, it is true, some of her early converts seem to have been in danger of so far mistaking the genius of the new religion as to imagine that in the future they were to be discharged from active attendance on their secular affairs. But the apostle most pointedly guarded them against so gross an error, and expressly and repeatedly enjoined them to perform the particular duties of their several stations with increased alacrity and fidelity, that they might thereby do credit to their Christian profession. Let it be remembered that the grand characteristic mark of the true Christian is his desiring to please God in all his thoughts and words and actions, to take the revealed word to be the rule of his belief and practice, to let his light shine before men, and in all things to adorn the doctrine which he professes. No calling is prescribed, no pursuit forbidden, no science or art No pleasure is disallowed, which is reconcilable with this principle. It must indeed be confessed that Christianity would not favor that vehement and inordinate ardor in the pursuit of temporal objects, which tends to the acquisition of immense wealth or of widely spread renown. Nor is it calculated to gratify the extravagant views of those mistaken politicians, the chief object of whose admiration and the main scope of whose endeavors for their country are extended dominion, commanding power, and unrivaled affluence, rather than those more solid advantages of peace, comfort, security. These men would barter comfort for greatness. In their vain reveries, they forget that a nation consists of individuals, and that true national prosperity is no other than the multiplication of particular happiness. But true Christian benevolence is always occupied in producing happiness to the utmost of its power, and according to the extent of its sphere, be it large or more limited, it contracts itself to the measure of the smallest. It can expand itself to the amplitude of the largest. It resembles majestic rivers which are poured from an unfailing and abundant source, silent and peaceful in their outset. They begin with dispensing beauty and comfort to every cottage by which they pass. In their further progress, they fertilize provinces and enrich kingdoms. At length, they pour themselves into the ocean, where, changing their names but not their nature, they visit distant nations and other hemispheres, and spread throughout the world the expansive tide of their beneficence. Thank you.
Paul,
That's
it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing to think of Wilberforce writing that, and then all that it would propel him to go and do. I imagine there are lots of people here like me who feel like I'm no Wilberforce. So what does this look like for us personally? And if I can ask you two questions, what does this also look like for LICC at an organisational level?
Yeah, so that was amazing. It was like him being in the room.
Tears are good.
Sorry?
We love tears.
Personally, Karl Barth talked about the relationship between Scripture and Jesus, and he talked about the way the written word bears witness to the living word, Jesus Christ. And therefore, for me, the more that I've engaged with the Bible, the more that has been an encounter with Jesus that's transformational and affects everything, the totality of life. And as I encounter Jesus, I hear Jesus saying to me that I am to love God and love my neighbour as myself. And therefore that necessitates my own involvement in the world. And so whatever I've done, some ways has been driven by that desire, that conviction, that vision for being fully alive. Irenaeus and that quote is also one of my favourites. The glory of God is seen in a human being fully alive. In other words, as we live as God has created us to live, as we fulfill our creative, redemptive purpose, God's glory is seen and human beings flourish. That is extraordinary. What an extraordinary privilege, opportunity we have to join God in that work. And so that then relates absolutely to LICC. Do you know that 98% of Christians don't feel that they're either envisioned or equipped to live as disciples of Jesus in 95% of their waking lives. Often the church has reduced the Christian faith to a leisure activity on Sunday. And we know that it is, if you'll pardon the cliche, but it's often easier to sing a little louder on a Sunday than to live a little bolder every other day of the week. And so what we're about is seeking to equip a whole generation to integrate the gospel with all of life, to live as disciples of Jesus, Monday into Saturday, through Sunday, and to live authentically as his disciples. And so our vision is that within the next 5 years, we could engage 1 million Christians in that whole life discipleship vision. We're about 360,000 at the moment, so there's a long way to go, but we've got faith and we've got hope. And we want to imagine a future where every Christian is living their life as Jesus would live it if he were them, in the different spaces and places they live and work and show up. Just imagine for a moment the difference that would make. Imagine the difference it would make on our lives and the lives of those that we interact with and the organizations of which we're part and the culture in which we live. It would change everything. And so that's our invitation. And so we would love people to connect with LICC. There's an opportunity to do that in the lounge. We've got a little competition that we're running with an amazing prize. So we would love you to be part of that. Connect with us. Our desire is to get alongside you and serve you in the call of Jesus to follow him. And we'd love to share with you some of the resources that we have. This is such an exciting moment, isn't it? As well as all the challenges, I am convinced that God is doing something new in this day. And the opportunity, privilege we have is to join, get involved and take part.
Paul, we think you are amazing. We think LICC is amazing. Can we show our appreciation for Paul Wood?